With the new My Lowe's Pro Rewards American Express card, earn 3 points per dollar spent on Lowe's qualifying purchases for the first 6 months after card account opening. Plus, save 5% every day on eligible purchases at Lowe's and earn points on eligible purchases everywhere else Amex is accepted. Card members get more at Lowe's. Subject to credit approval. 5% can't be combined with any other offer. Exclusions and restrictions apply. Points subject to loyalty terms at Lowe's.com/terms and credit reward terms at Synchrony.com/MLPRA-terms. Visit Lowe's.com/business credit.
Hi, I'm Jenny.
And I'm Kristine, and welcome back to Big Little Lessons. Together, Jenny and I bring over 50 years of experience in elementary education.
We believe the lessons we teach and learn in kindergarten stay with us for a lifetime. Today, we're sharing a bonus episode because after our recent conversation with Amanda Feldman, we felt there was more to explore.
So Amanda is a licensed clinical social worker working inside a maximum security men's prison. And in our last episode, she gave us so much to think about when it comes to empathy, accountability, and healing.
We found ourselves coming back to a few moments that really stayed with us. So we invited Amanda to come back to continue the conversation.
Amanda, we're so grateful you're back with us. We've been thinking about this conversation all week.
I'm excited to share more.
Well, as you'd mentioned to us, there's so many layers. Mm-hmm. So we're going to touch upon some more layers today.
Yeah, I'll come back every week if you'll have me.
Well, so much in kindergarten, we want to teach our students to care for themselves, to care for others, to be responsible. And so this episode and what you're doing in your work there is a lot of parallel. Last time you started, we had the speed round questions. Mm-hmm. And I said, what was that question? Something that others might be surprised about your work. And you said that it's fun. And I wanted to ask you then, but I'm like, oh, we're wrapping it up. But can you explain where the fun is coming from in your work?
Totally. There can be a playfulness in the dynamic at times. Here's an example. I'll be walking across the yard and one of the guys on the yard will be like, "Miss, your shoes are untied." And I look down and they're not. And they're just like messing around just to be funny, just to make themselves laugh or to make me laugh. Sometimes we might even use like a little bit more dark humor where there's rapport to do that, to sort of call them out in a lighthearted way. I think also just because I love it so much, there is a natural byproduct of fun that happens when you're doing something you love. And I think the authenticity that I try to show up with every day I'm there and every time I'm meeting with somebody, I think just allows it to be more fun between us and in their experience there. And also, like I said last time, these are people too. Yep. They happen to be incarcerated and they still experience the full range of human emotions and day-to-day life in a limited way in this environment, but they still get to have all of it. So they have recreation, yard time, what we laughed about being recess last time, right? And so they're out there like playing games and playing basketball, and there's outside organizations that come in and will facilitate different seminars or different activities. And so there's some fun that goes on.
Yeah, I think because we see from television shows and movies and books, we think everyone's super serious and cranky and angry and sad. So it's refreshing. I wasn't expecting to hear that you have fun.
I think we all do have preconceived notions of what it's like. And for all the people that will never go into a prison or see what it's like in a prison, I think we think maybe it's scary, or maybe the people that work there might not have the same attitude that you have because you approach this with such positivity, which is so wonderful.
I know, but I still need to know, Amanda, do you have times that you get scared?
There are other people who work there who have a different point of view and perspective and attitude toward being there and working with individuals who are incarcerated. And that is because it can be unsafe there. There are things that happen that are unsafe, absolutely. We're talking about people who, especially at a maximum security prison, who have committed violent crimes and engaged in violence in their life. And now all of that exists in a very concentrated place. And a lot of people walking around with their trauma unhealed. I call it like the hot potato of trauma. Like, I don't want to hold it, you hold it. I don't want to hold it, you hold it. And that can look like displaced anger and aggression in this kind of environment, whether it's toward each other, whether it's toward staff. I try to really be aware of the overall vibe on the yard or in a building, or even just between me and an individual patient that I might be in the room with, how I'm feeling in this place, and also what the energy seems to be like. And so, for example, last week, since we've recorded our last episode, I was in a building talking to one of my patients. On the upper tier, there were a few gentlemen that it was loud and it caught my attention. So I turned and they were horse playing. And it's hard sometimes for me to discern the difference of if they're laughing or joking around while they're doing it. But that can also escalate quickly when you think about kids and they're like playing and joking with each other, but then one can be triggered abruptly, or it can cross the line for one person.
Playground politics.
Oh, you guys call it playground politics?
I do.
It's so funny because at prison, that's what their like own little sort of code of conduct is called, prison politics.
There was a book written, Playground Politics, and I adapted it after I thought it was such a good statement.
It is. And the patient I was talking to said to me, oh, they're just playing around. You know, but anything can happen at any time. That's for sure. And I don't want to be naive about that. Generally, I feel safe.
Okay.
And trust my environment, trust my own boundaries, trust that there are officers there in the immediate area if something happens to be able to respond. Trust my judgment of who I'm around, whether particularly patients or individuals who are incarcerated around me, and what I'm feeling being around them to know when I may need to remove myself from a situation, or when I may need to enforce or reestablish a boundary.
So are there procedures? So say all of a sudden you're like, I'm getting a weird feeling here. This is not right. What would be your next step?
So let's say that happens and I'm in an appointment. I have every right to end an appointment for any reason. I can let the officer know.
Have you ever done that?
No, I've never really had to. The other day, we were already at the end of an appointment, and the interaction between the patient and I, he was like sort of testing a boundary that I had already established multiple times. And so I did say to him, we're at the end of our time. And at this point, I'm just going to wrap us up here. And got a little bit more stern than I usually would. I try to take an approach that something we talked about last time as well, that like behind the challenging behavior, there's something more going on there. Generally try to take a stance or position myself to explore that. But the limitations of the system, the time constraints of a particular session, or of how many sessions I have with this person, we're not always able to get there fully. And this was a situation where it just felt like there's not enough time for him to be receptive to this any more than he already has in a meaningful way. And for the safety of my psyche and my sort of self-protection psychologically and emotionally, that it's best to just end things here.
Well, good for you. And having that clarity to know when it's time. Do you feel like it translates your work in the prisons outside of the prison walls?
Yeah. So in the world of therapy in general, there is a clinical term or concept known as vicarious trauma. And essentially it means that we can take on the trauma of somebody else, or of it. Sort of like if you watch a scary movie and then you have nightmares at night, that's like a low level example of vicarious trauma. And I go into this environment every day that requires me to, as much as it's fun, and I generally feel a sense of safety there, where things happen and have happened, and I've seen things that have happened. I have heard in detail things that have happened or gone on. And so I find myself more hyper vigilant in my outside life, or sometimes, like more aware of my surroundings. Like if I'm walking my dog at night, I'm looking over my shoulder more than maybe I used to, or I prefer in a restaurant to sit in the spot at the table that faces the door so that I can see more. It's just like a natural, and a lot of people who work in prison will say that. We call it correctional awareness, and that sort of just carries over outside for us. Another example might be like there are times where I don't feel like anybody in my life can truly understand what it's like for me to be there. And that's no fault of anyone's, they can't. But sometimes that leaves me feeling more shut down. If it was a heavier day at work, feeling like I have anyone to reach for or sharing about it. But then my demeanor around anyone I might see for the rest of the day maybe is a little bit more curt or more standoffish, right? Because I feel alone in that, or not fully like understood or connected. It can feel isolating. So that's like another example, I would say, of the vicarious trauma of it.
Wow. Oh, and you mentioned last time that you continue your own work, that you're always being very self-aware how you're responding. So I think that's something you're going to continue to do.
Yeah, behind every good therapist is an even better one. If I didn't say that last time, shout out to Katie. She's amazing. And that is a place, my own therapy is a place where, depending on what's going on, at work and how it's impacting me, I have a place to take it there always. And she's been amazing in terms of her evolving understanding from things I've shared to hold that with me and help me navigate it, even though she's never worked in that type of environment.
It's like she's at a distance and can see it in a different perspective. Interesting.
Let's talk about healing and accountability. So one of the things we kept thinking about after our conversation was growth. In your work, how do you know when someone has truly begun to heal from trauma and take responsibility for their actions? Like, how do you measure that, or what do you see in your practice?
It can be really subtle because change happens internally before we might see outward signs of change. The analogy I often use, even with my patients, to normalize the progression, and sometimes they feel like they're not doing enough or they're not progressing quickly enough, is working out, right? You don't work out for the first time and then you're swole tomorrow.
We wish.
Right? I know. But it's over time and the commitment to the process. And so I would say just somebody showing up to these appointments is evidence that something's changing. And then there might be small, subtle things that you start to notice. Here's an interesting example that actually just happened this week as well. I had a patient who I've only met once so far, and he came in, and through our conversation, it prompted him to share about a dream he had that I was in. And it wasn't anything like nefarious. He shared that he was in my office sitting in the therapeutic module, the cage that they're in this particular clinic space. We were having a session, and I tried to probe a little bit about what was the content of the dream session or what was the tone. And he didn't really have much detail. But aside from any detail, what that showed me is he internalized our first session. And subconsciously, that presented itself through having a dream with me. Something like that tells me that even just one conversation shifted something in him, and his inner therapist that lives in his subconscious world is now showing up in his dream world to try to bring it into more consciousness. And this could lead to a whole episode about dream analysis. But
right. That's a great example, though. Your average layperson would not see it that way or think of it that way.
And I think that's also an example of just when someone starts spontaneously sharing things when they come into session, bringing things forward, that can be a sign that something in their inner world and the landscape is changing, a softening in their demeanor. If maybe they were more guarded initially, they might become more open to talking about certain things. the language surrounding how they talk about something may become less rigid or just change altogether because their perspective is evolving. What else? They may start to exhibit like greater consideration for other people, and not just that their perspective is shifting, but their ability to take another person's perspective. So a lot of them come in talking about a situation that may have triggered them, right? You would hear the ways in which they feel like a victim of that situation, but now maybe they're able to say, well, I could understand why the officer, approached me that way.
So they're doing the work essentially, and little by little, you're noticing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Yeah, I like that there's small shifts as well. Do you ever give them assignments in between your appointments?
So there is a curriculum that we're tasked to utilize in the sessions. I prefer not to. And there are like different evidence-based practices or more manualized models of therapy that are great, and they're based in research and they have great outcomes. It's not my approach.
Okay.
It's a wonderful curriculum. I had used it before in other settings. And typically what I'll do is allow whatever the patient wants to bring in to sort of drive the content of our session and conversation. And as the session unfolds, I'll be able to consider or relate to which topics may have felt relevant. And I'll typically print those for them to take and encourage them to read it. And they have some writing prompts and things too. Utilize that outside of session because, again, like working out, I tell them if you work out with a personal trainer once every other week, you might see some progress. But if you also continue to do those exercises on your own time on a more regular basis, the gains made may happen sooner.
This is the story of the one who keeps multiple buildings running smoothly day after day. Plumbing that flows, HVAC that hums, cleaning supplies that keep surfaces sparkling. That's why she counts on Grainger. With easy reordering online and 24/7 support, Grainger helps her keep the products she needs on hand. So shelves stay stocked and buildings stay ready. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
I'm wondering if the men that you work with, do they have to meet with you, or are they given an option to meet with you?
So our program is voluntary. They can absolutely decline. There are a lot of nuances to that because anytime they refuse services, nothing punitive can happen in a direct way, but indirectly for individuals who maybe have to go to the parole board eventually, how that may be perceived. But they can absolutely decline. So it's their choice to show up to appointments.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's a good segue to talk about accountability. I think about the victims and family members who have been hurt in it and the causes. Can you talk to us a little bit about, from a victims and families approach and the accountability that these men are serving?
Yeah, I think it's a really great point because it relates back to what we're talking about in terms of signs of change and evidence of change that we might notice. And a lot of the gentlemen talk about it as living in amends and making choices now that honor the people who have been impacted by their crimes and by their choices in the past in general. And that includes their own families too, as well, right? That their choices have left their families hurt, as well as the victims and victims' families. So there's a lot of people who are victims in their crimes. And when they get to a place where they can really hold that without shame, without beating themselves up, but just with a lot of humility and honesty, their lives actually start to look different and carry more meaning. And part of the meaning of their lives is living out the life that maybe their victims couldn't if it was a loss of life, or that holds the people they've hurt at the center of their choices. And I think that that is empathy, right? It's now I have this consideration for other people and how my choices affect other people, and I don't want to hurt anyone else in any kind of way, or even men I work with who have not committed a violent crime. That shift in, well, my crime wasn't a violent crime, to every crime hurts somebody because there's somebody who's affected by this, even if it's not physical violence. The people I work with have done in their lives. But there is a very fine line between victim and offender. And we're talking about individuals, and we talked a lot about trauma last time, who were massively victimized throughout their lives. And the crimes they've committed or their decision-making process is a reenactment of their own victimization. And Jenny, I think you had said last time, the idea of hurt people, and it never justifies it. And that comes up in sessions a lot when I'm actually sort of validating the role of their trauma to help them develop insight into that, trying to provide some psychoeducation for them around that so they can release some of the shame and actually have healing. A lot of them say, but I don't want to make excuses. And so there are glimpses, right, of this capacity for empathy and accountability that is there. Mm-hmm. It's just not evolved as much for them quite yet for so many reasons. Their victimization has never been acknowledged. So how could they acknowledge the victimization of someone else, especially at their own hands, which then is going to carry a lot of shame? So it's complex.
It is. At such a young age, when we're teaching our youngest kids, we want them to understand another person's point of view. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when they're little, they don't get it. But that's what we're doing as parents and coaches and teachers. We're working with our young people. But it sounds like so many of your patients never had that connection made when they were little.
Well, and what you said developmentally makes sense. Like, little kids don't get it because those parts of their brain are not developed yet. And there are parts of the brain that are responsible for how we relate and empathy, and trauma attacks those parts of the brain, essentially, structurally. Like, this is a whole nother episode, the neurobiology of trauma and what it does in the brain, let alone just the belief system that originates in traumatic experiences and mistrust of others. And nobody cares about what I went through, so why should I care about what someone else goes through? Again, layered and multifaceted and very complex, but developmentally appropriate at a younger age when we're trying to teach them. And now you're also talking about individuals that lacked that type of guidance.
They had one trauma after another. Mm-hmm. So now they're big people, but they are lacking those skills. So to your point, your goal is to help them recognize and learn that accountability and empathy for others.
Mm-hmm. And reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, Kristine, of the little boy still inside the man. My role almost sometimes is reparenting. And I think a lot of people who work in this system struggle with that because they're like, I'm not their mom, I'm not their dad. Like, that's not what and it's like, but I think we said this last time, every system has failed them. And these are individuals who've fallen through the cracks. And that's not to take away that like they are responsible as well for the choices they make. I often say, like, if they had gotten the help they needed when the things that were going on in their life were not their fault, it might have prevented them from doing the things they are responsible for, that they do have agency over. And even now, I would argue there's some amount of agency, but so much of it is unconscious. The metaphor I use for them is that their trauma has become like the shot collar of their inner world. They like that. I think that analogy resonates because of the idea of a shot collar. Until you heal this stuff, until you heal your own trauma, you're going to continue to victimize others and yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's a very destructive place to be in.
We've been talking a lot about empathy, but we're wondering what the difference is between sympathy and empathy. We were having that conversation earlier. And can you define that?
It's a really wonderful question. And I believe I referenced Brené Brown last time and one of her cartoon shorts. She talks about the distinction between sympathy and empathy. And what she says is empathy fuels connection and sympathy drives disconnection. She'll go on to explain that more, but sort of my take on it is sympathy is more about feeling for somebody, almost on the outside looking in. There's an element of compassion, but people often experience it more as pity or feeling sorry for me. And my patients hate that. I think a lot of us do.
Yes.
No, people don't want sympathy. They would rather empathy towards themselves, yes, from others.
Empathy to me embodies more of a feeling with somebody rather than for somebody. So there's a lot more relatedness in that by joining someone in their emotional experience. It's sort of that age-old adage of really putting yourself in someone else's shoes and then walking through the terrain with them, jumping down into the hole they're in with them and alongside them. And some of that comes from being able to put words to what you imagine they're experiencing, but being able to go into that place within yourself. And that's why it requires a lot of self-awareness to demonstrate that perspective taking in a way where they truly feel seen, heard, understood. It reminds me of when I worked in juvenile hall. One of my patients was in the hallway and the probation staff had called me in to see if I could help de-escalate. He was pacing back and forth in the hallway, homicidal, with a pencil in his hand. And when I got there, I guess at some point he had already sat down on the floor. So I went and I sat down on the floor with him. And then he got up and he was pacing and I was pacing with him and he was pacing around the room. And I stayed alongside him. I mean, I knew it was safe for me to do that. I wouldn't have done it if it didn't feel safe. But to just, I'm in this with you.
Right? Coming alongside him.
I'm not like, you're down in the hole and I'm up here from up above like, ooh, it really sucks down there. That looks like it sucks. Sorry you're there. It's like, let me climb down in there and experience what this is like with you and see if we can find our way out of it together just by being in the space with you.
So being in the space, do you bring that home with you then afterwards, or how do you detach yourself? Like you've come alongside, you've paced the hallways with him. Now you're going home. How do you switch that off?
Traditionally, most therapists would say you're supposed to sort of separate that out. And I think that those boundaries are really important. But to me, they're not all or nothing. They're more fluid than that. And I do think it comes naturally to me. So this isn't something I'm doing or cultivating just to be able to have empathy. It's just kind of inherent in me that my patients really do stay with me. And they leave an imprint, like in the deepest place of my heart, in the purest place of my heart, in a way that's really meaningful to me and that I wouldn't want to change. There are times where it does, I notice that like maybe I'm needing to take care of myself differently or release some of that or let go or loosen the reins on it maybe. But I think that's also been this in particular has been a huge reason why there's such a deep connection with my patients and the rapport that is there. There's just so much authenticity around it and they're so easily open because the care is genuine and it's not just like, well, I'm going to leave all my feelings about you in prison with you. Like you stay with me and come with me. When I travel, I come back and I share with them, like, I don't take for granted that I get to go see the big world that is out there. And this is your whole world, but it's not the whole world. And so I'm seeing things and I'm like, oh, my guys would love this. And I take pictures of it so that they can see it, or I come back and I share about it with them. I mean, that's one example, but even just like, I have copious notes in my phone of reflections from sessions or things I'm working through within myself with patients and, separating out what it's bringing up for me that's my own to process in therapy, but also what it's bringing up for me that I can then use to bring back in and make their therapeutic work richer and deeper and more meaningful. And so in that way, it's actually so important that there's not such a black and white separation there.
So many areas of our life are rarely black and white, right? there's a lot of shades of gray.
So you have so much empathy and compassion, and then you're also, you bring that to your practice, but then you're working on accountability at the same time. Because I don't see one as being more important than the other at this point. All of those things are equally important.
I think the compassion, the empathy is what allows for the accountability to take place. Okay. And to expand a bit on some of the other layers of empathy, I talked about it last time. You had asked me a question about how do you cultivate empathy? And I talked a lot about self-awareness, but I reflected on that more after we recorded the episode. And the new sort of layer that became clear to me was it's through that self-awareness that we become more capable and willing to show up for others in the fullest expression of ourselves, being able to lower our own defenses. And when we meet other people with our own flawed humanity, it often invites them to do the same. And it's in that relational space that learning, growth, healing, accountability have room to show up and expand, instead of all the shame and the guilt that so much of their defendedness shields them from, and that blocks accountability. Because if I'm ashamed, then why am I going to face myself?
Mm-hmm. It's like you said, there's lots of layers, and it's so helpful. So that there's compassion, empathy, accountability, self-awareness. All of those things need to be in place in order for movement to happen.
And they work together.
Mm-hmm. And just like vulnerability and humanity, right? Like we're all only human doing the best we can, and everyone's best looks different for lots of different reasons, and not to judge that.
That's my big little lesson today. You're so wise, Amanda.
So wise. You've taught us so much, and it's been such amazing insight into the world that you live in and the world that these men live in.
I think that it's easy to dehumanize people who are serving time and think it's a waste of time, and they're taking our taxpayers' dollars, and they're getting shelter, and they might have some TV time and recess yard time, whatever. But they are human beings, and what you're doing is so important.
I loved that you mentioned dehumanizing them. And I think there's sometimes a need for us to do that. And we were talking about black and white just a moment ago. It allows our brains to make sense of things, but to only see them for their crime. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't also hold the fact that they've done these things, or there are parts of them that are capable of those actions, right? But how many of us want to be seen for the worst moment or worst decision in our life?
We've all made mistakes. Maybe not as violent, but we've made mistakes. So they are serving time. They are in prison for a reason. But are we supposed to just punish them day after day after day? No.
And if that worked, the recidivism rates would be so much lower. I mean, would you as teachers, one, put a child in timeout for 3 hours or for the rest of the school day? When in however you correct their behavior, whether it's, I don't even think they call it timeout anymore, right? Like the cool down corner. Or
we have a cozy corner.
Great.
Calming corner.
For a reason, right? That even, there's more compassion in that than time out. You're excluded because bad behavior. No, right? But the other piece of that is we don't just enforce consequence, if we're going to do it appropriately, without the teachable moment of helping a child understand why that behavior is problematic. And I know we touched on that last time, but that's a lot of what has happened historically in the prison system, and with mass incarceration. It's lock them up, throw away the key, forget about them. Society is now safer. But, the other thing is that many of these people are going to be returning to the community one day. And how do you want them to return? Forget about them and the healing that someone believes or doesn't believe they deserve. Just the fact alone that they're going to return to the community. Would you rather them return like a more healed, safer individual, or, stuck in the same pattern and cycle of thinking and behavior that got them there in the first place, and then reoffend and re-victimize other people?
Well, thank you for doing the work you're doing, because yes, we do want them to come back and to be better healed and be productive, wonderful people in our community.
So this time, let's offer a simple piece of homework that's different from last time.
Okay. And that is, notice one moment where you might usually hold back or protect yourself, and instead choose to show up just a little bit more openly and honestly. So give it a go. Amanda, is there any final things before we close this episode?
Like I said, we're all just human beings trying our best to be human.
Yep.
And so I try to just hold that at the center of everything I do with everybody in my personal life and the people I work with.
And it's wonderful to hear different perspectives. So we are grateful for you and for sharing all your wisdom and all your perspectives.
And your ongoing work and learning and seeking. That's what, like you mentioned, what prison systems have looked like in the past, and we know what's not working. Mm-hmm. So let's make some real change, and you are making a difference.
My patients are some of my biggest teachers in this life. Aww. They give me so much. They teach me so much about myself and about life. So again, I just want to honor them and give them the credit they deserve for what I'm able to now bring here to this venue and format. They're with me right in this moment.
Oh, I love that. They seem like really, really good people. They're understanding themselves better to become better people.
And vice versa. And they are great people who've done some not so great things. But
well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for coming back.
Yeah.
We needed to finish it.
And we'll need more Amanda time, too.
It felt unresolved, right?
Listeners, please continue to follow us on Instagram at Teach Big Little Lessons.
And also, if you'd like to connect or share your thoughts or if have any questions, please email us at teachbiglittlelessons@gmail.com.
We don't have all the answers, but we have a lot of experience.
And we also know that there's big little lessons everywhere. So until next time.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.